Welcome to Math. It's Miss Betby's here, and today we are going to be rocking around the clock. Have you ever heard of that song? There's that old song, and it was, we're gonna rock, rock, rock till broad daylight. So today we're just gonna rock all day until we're finished with our clocks, okay? Until our time's up. So we're gonna practice and learn these new skills with being able to tell time on a clock. So that's what we mean by rocking around the clock today. So let's get started. Okay, so today I have for you guys first our standard, okay? By the end of next week, we should be able to do two main things with time. We should be able to tell time to the nearest minute, and we should be able to also determine elapsed time, what we call elapsed time, the amount of time that passes, intervals of time. We're going to hit more on that next week. This week we want to focus at really becoming good at telling time. This can be hard for us in third grade. Now, digital time, that's nothing. You guys see digital times all the time. You know that, but it's those analog clocks. And even though we kind of live in a world where we can look at our phone at any time and we can look at digital times, it's still really important for us to be able to know how to read an analog clock, okay? So we're going to focus on that and really mastering and getting good at it so that we can then learn about time intervals and how much time passes, because these are skills that you're going to use your entire life. They're huge, okay? We can't just not know them. So in second grade, you guys learned how to tell time to the nearest 5 minutes, okay? Maybe your teacher took you further. Maybe they did show you how to tell time to the nearest minute. But if not, no worries. That's where we're going here in third grade. So let's just kind of review a few of the concepts that you learned from second grade. So I have here on the board a clock, okay? I've made a clock using numbers. And then I also put hands on the clock to remind you which hand is the hour hand and which one is the minute hand, because this is one of the things that if we can't remember that, then we struggle to tell the time on an analog clock, okay? So let's remind ourselves, okay? There's two hands on an analog clock. Sometimes there's a third hand that is very skinny and long and red, and that is our second hand. We're not going to hit on that today. We're just going to be looking at our hour and minute hands, okay? The minute hand is longer in length than the hour hand. So your minute hand is your longer hand and your hour hand is your shorter hand, okay? That's one of those things you just have to memorize and remember, okay? So practice that every day. If you're someone who's still struggling with that, practice it each day. Remind yourself, talk to yourself about it. Eventually it'll stick, I promise, okay? So when we look at a clock, we see these same numbers, but these numbers can mean two different things, right? Okay, so something that's not represented on my clock that we're going to talk about in just a minute is the fact that the reason why these numbers stand for two different things on a clock is because there are little things that sometimes we don't even notice between these numbers, and that's what causes them to be able to represent something else when we're talking about time, okay? So here's the rule, okay? Your hour hand, which is your shorter hand, when it points to a number on the clock, it stands for the number you see, okay? There's only 12 numbers on a clock, 1 to 12. So the hours run 1 to 12. And then once we hit those, it starts over again. You learned about AM and PM in second grade as well. And so once we finished 12 all the way back around to 12, then we go from AM to PM and then back from PM to AM. It's a cycle, okay? Now, our minute hand's a different story. When we see that minute hand on a number, it does not mean just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It doesn't mean that. It means something else, okay? So remember how I told you there were those little marks between each of the numbers? Well, I brought my clock that I use for teaching to show this to you, okay? And so if we look at our clock, you notice that everywhere there's a number in red, there's a smaller blue number right here. Does everybody see that? Do you remember learning that last year in second grade? You probably do. So each number, okay? At the 12, it's the 60-minute marker, okay? So there's 60 minutes in 1 hour. So once we hit 60 minutes, we must start our minutes again within a new hour, okay? So see how there are these little dots? Sometimes they're lines, depending on what clock you're looking at, between each of the numbers. Do you see those? They're between every number, okay? Well, for the minutes, whenever it's on an even number, the 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 12, you're counting by fives, okay? So as we go around the clock, let's look at that. So we come from 12 to 1 and we say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. Now with time, we don't write 60 on a clock. It's a new hour, so we say whatever the hour is, o'clock, and we write it with 2 zeros. We don't write 60 when we write it digitally, okay? We'll get back to that in a minute. So now the question becomes, what I've noticed in 3rd grade is some kids don't realize that you can't just not count by fives for your minutes, okay? And you can. It's not always going to be right on a 5-minute marker. So between each of these numbers, there were these dots or sometimes lines. Well, let's look at that. Between the 12 and the 1, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when I get to the number, 5. There's 5 minutes between each of these larger numbers. That's why when we land on that number, we can count by fives. Okay, and we accumulate fives. They grow, and we increase by 5 each time we go around the clock. And so you notice you're skip counting by fives. 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on around the clock. Let's look at another one. Let's look between 1 and 2, and let's see if there's the same amount of dots or lines. Well, let's look. Here we are. So here we are on this one. We don't count this one that we're on. That was the 5th minute to the other one. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There it is again. Okay, another 5 minutes, and 5 and 5 gives me 10. That's why the 2 represents 10 minutes. Does everybody see that? Okay, and then that cycle goes along around the rest of the clock. Well, guess what? That's how we get to having times with minutes that aren't just skip counting by fives. Okay, so if we had our clock between these two numbers for our minute hand, we can still tell the time because it makes it easier if we can count by our fives instead of counting every single one by ones. That wouldn't be very efficient for us to do. So if we already know that when we skip from the 12 to the 1, that's 5 minutes, then I can say 6, 7. And then I look at my hour hand's pointing at 11, and it is 11:07. Okay, those single digit numbers, we're going to talk about that too when we get to writing digitally. You have to have 2 digits behind your colon every time on your clock, okay? So we'll talk about that. All right, so does everybody see how there are more minutes? There are 5 minutes between each of the numbers on the clock when we're talking minutes, okay? And we can tell time to the minute by using our knowledge of skip counting by fives and then adding on more ones. Or sometimes if it's like really close right here, instead of counting all these ones, sometimes we say 5, 10, and then you can take off 1 and count back. 10 less than 1 is 9 to give me 11:09. Okay, so you can either add on your ones or you can count back if you've counted too far and count back to get your accurate number. Okay, so I'm going to set this down for just a second. All right, so that was a lot of information really quickly, okay? But it's important that you know it in order for us to be able to tell time to the minute, okay? You've got to know how that clock's set up and you've got to know how to read it. All right, so let's just do some basic 5-minute times, and then I'm going to add on some 3rd grade to the nearest minute times. All right, you ready? Okay, so here's my clock. I'm going to put a time on it, okay? And I'm going to give you a minute to think about that time and let you tell me what time is on the clock. Okay, are you ready? So look at your hour hand, which again is our shorter hand. Then look at your minute hand. Think about how our minutes are not just these direct numbers. Count, skip count by fives, because we're going back to reviewing 2nd grade, so you can do that here. All right, so let's look at it. goodness, these are my favorite ones, okay? But sometimes they can be the most confusing to you guys, okay? But I just love when y'all finally get it, okay? This is my hour hand. It's not directly on any number, so what do we do? How do we know what the hour is? Well, let's look at the two numbers that it does fall between. It falls between 1 and it falls between 2. Okay, so if it falls between 1 and 2, then we ask ourselves, is it on this larger number yet? It's not. It's not there yet. So is it this hour yet? No. So if it's between two numbers, you go to the lesser number, of the two, and you say it's still this hour. Okay? The reason why this hour hand is moved between these two numbers is because as your minute hand moves around the clock, both hands on the clock are constantly moving. And as your minute hand moves around and gets closer to the 12, that hour hand's inching its way over to the next hour. Does everybody see that? The minute hand just moves faster because it's only moving in 1-minute intervals, and your hour hand's moving in 60-minute intervals. Okay, so it's moving very slowly as that minute hand moves. All right, so our hour is still 1, and then our minutes. Let's count those by 5. So I'm here, and let's go. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So the time is 1:25. Well, let's write that, okay? Because not only do I need to be able to tell the time, I also have to know how to write a time. So the time we said was 1 for our hour. So when we write a time digitally, we put our hour first. Then we put 2 dots, which we call a colon, okay? And then we write our minutes. You always have to have 2 numbers on the right side of your colon. You have to have 2. So if you get a 1-digit number, you have to put a 0 in front of it, just like you've learned with writing numbers, okay? We don't have to worry about that right now because our minutes were 25. So our time is 1:25. Does everybody see that? I'm going to give you one more to review, and then we're going to start getting into 3rd grade because you can do it. I gave you a tricky one. Look at this one closely before you tell or write or think about your time. Look at it really close. Okay, so let's start with our hour. Well, we know our hour hand is that shorter hand. On my clock, it's red, right? Okay, let's look at it. What number is it pointing to? Kind of looks like it's pointing at the 3, doesn't it? But is it directly on the 3? Not right in the center of the 3, and there's a reason why. Because is it 3 o'clock yet? Look at this clock. You have to look. You can't just look at the hour hand when you're trying to determine time. You have to look at the whole clock, the hour hand and the minute hand, because it tells you a lot. Then you've got to think about, what do I know? What do I know about a clock? I know that as the minute hand's moving closer to this 12, the hour hand's moving closer to the next hour, right? So if I think about that, it's actually between these two numbers. And if I ask myself, is it 3 o'clock yet? The answer is no. It's not quite there. It's about to be 3 o'clock. So my hour is still what? 2. 2 is still my hour right now. So I would put 2, my colon, and then let's count our minutes. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. So the time is 2. Oops, I'm sorry. Went to write my 2 again. 2:50. Does everybody see that? Okay, so don't get tricked. I gave you this one on purpose because I really do want to review how one of the most common mistakes we make is that where that hour hand's located, writing the correct hour. Okay, so really pay attention to that. Really ask yourself, looking at the whole clock, is it this time? Is this the hour? No, because if it was 3 o'clock and my minutes hand was way over here, then my hour hand would be closer to the 4, the next number. So think about that. And if you've never been taught that before, now you know, okay? So remember that. All right. Now, some of you too, I do want to point out, some of you may have wanted to go like, you don't think it's efficient to count all those 5s. If you're really good at this, then you might have said, well, this is 60. I know that 5, 10 less than 60 is 50. So the hour is 2:50. So you might have done that, and that's fine too. Okay? That's good thinking. All right. So I'm going to now put a time on the clock, and we're going to practice for 3rd grade. Okay. All right, so look closely at this time right here. Okay, so let's look at our hour hand. Okay. Now before we say our hour, let's look at our minute hand. Look at it. Okay, so something that I always point out as you're getting close, once you get to the 6 on this side of the clock, that hour hand's really getting closer to the next hour. Okay, so those are the ones you really want to be mindful for. For right now, we're on the opposite side of the 6. So our hour hand is between 2 numbers. It's between the 4 and the 5. So which one did we say would be the hour if it's between 2 numbers? Always go to that lesser, smaller number. So in this case, it's 4. So 4 is my hour. Colon. And then my minutes, let's count our minutes. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Okay, it's not directly on the 30, so I can't go to 30. I could, but I have to do something if I do that. So I'm at 25, 26, 27, 28. Does everybody see that? You could have gone to 30 and said 30 and then counted back 29, 28. Either way, I'm getting 28 for my minutes. So my time is 4:28. Look at you. That wasn't so bad, was it? Just going from 5 minutes to being able to count on by ones. You can do that with any number. So you can absolutely do that with your telling time and your minutes, okay? We're going to do one more, and then we're going to do another activity that I think y'all will like. I hope you will. All right, let's look at this one. Okay, I want you to get this time in your head or write it down. All right, so what time do we see on the clock here? Well, again, we always do want to start looking at our hour, but we also still have to make sure we're looking at the whole clock, okay? This one's pretty obvious. Our hour hand's pointing directly on a number, and if we look at where the minute hand's located, it's not far from the new hour, right? Do y'all see that? So our hour here is just what it's on, which is 7. So we would write 7, and then what's this called again? Colon, and then we need to write our minutes. So we have 5, 6, 7. This is one of those where I only have one digit. It's only in the ones place, but I have to write 2. So what do? I put a 0 in front of that one-digit number because this still means 7. If I put the 0 behind the 7, what number does that make? 70. It goes in front, okay? So we would read this time as 7:07, okay? Or you could say 7 minutes past or after 7. You could say that too. All right, so now that we've done a little basic learning of that, I want you to keep practicing that. Look for analog clocks and see if you can read the time on them throughout the rest of this week, okay? Because we want to get really good at that by the time this week's over so we can do elapsed time next week. All right, so who's heard of the song, What Does the Fox Say? One says, what does the fox say? Do, 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 do. All right, well, today we are going to think about that song, but we're going to say, what does the clock say? Okay, so what does the clock say? Let's look. Okay, we have 4 clocks here, 4 analog clocks, and we want to determine what time do we see on these clocks, okay? And then we want to, the part that says, what does it say? How would we read this time, okay? What are some information that we have about it? So I'm going to model one for you, okay? And then you're going to help me with the rest of these. Okay, so the first one I have says, the hour hand is between 8 and 9. So think about that. My hour hand is between 8 and 9. And the minute hand is 1 minute before the 5. Well, let's look at our clocks here. Let's go for that hour hand first. Which one shows us the hour hand between the 8 and the 9? Well, let's look. Here it's between 4 and 5, 7 and 8, 7 and 8. Here's one, 8 and 9. Now let's check it. My next clue said that it was 1 minute before the 5. Well, there's the 5, and it is 1 minute before. So this speech bubble must go with this clock. Do we see that? And then what is the time on that clock? Well, if our hour hand's between the 8 and the 9, and our minute hand is just before the 5, then our hour is 8, and our minutes are 5, 10, 15, 20. Let's go ahead and go to 25 because it's just 1 in front of it. And what is 1 before 25, or 25 minus 1? 24. So the time on this clock is 8:24, and the information that I gave you to find that was your hour hand was between the 8 and the 9, and your minute hand was 1 before the 5. All right, let's do another one. The hour hand is on the 8, and the minute hand is 2 minutes before the 12. Ooh, 2 minutes before the 12 means it's getting really close to a new hour, right? Who else is thinking that? Okay, so we want to look at our clocks again. Our hour hand's on the 8, and our minute hand is 2 minutes before the 12. Well, I see that right here. Okay, so my question is, if our hour hand's on the 8 and our minute hand's 2 minutes before 8, is it 8 o'clock yet, friends? No, it is not. It's still what? 7. Very good. So this is one of those really, really tricky ones, okay? And then, so it's 7, and then our minutes would be, well, we know that this is 60 minutes, right? Let's just count back. So we would go 59, 58, and our time here would be 7:58. Okay, I'm going to write that so that you can see that as well. Does everybody see these? Okay, good job. All right, I'm not going to finish out the rest of those because I want to model writing for you, because you should be able to write. We're going to give the same kind of clues we just saw on these with this larger clock right here. So this larger clock has our hour hand between the 12 and the 1, and our minute hand between the 6 and the 7, right? So if we were giving hints about what our clock says to someone, we would say the hour hand is between 12 and 1, okay? The minute hand is, we need to be exact, okay? So it's 1, 2, 3 minutes is 3 minutes past the 6. Or we could have said 1, 2, okay, yeah. No, wait, looking at this more accurately, it should be, 2 minutes past the 6 and 3 minutes from the 7. Okay, so what would our time be? Well, our time is 12 for our hour, and our minutes are, we know that halfway around the clock, half of 60 is 30, or we could count it 31, 32. So our time is 12:32. That's what our clock says. Okay, guys, you did an awesome job rocking around the clock today, and we are going to continue this on Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you back. Practice your time this week. Pay attention to those tricky ones, and I'll see you back Thursday. Bye, guys.